Welcome to Games of Note. This is an introductory episode. We're going to be talking about the podcast, why we've done it, and a little bit about our history. And I guess we'll ramble a little bit more than we probably would do on a regular episode. So
I guess so. Yes.
Yes. So the voice you can hear is me, Will, and my co-host here is
Wayne.
So we'll start with what the podcast is. And Games of Note is a series where we talk about games. What we're trying to do is highlight the history of games that have been important. That's not whether or not they're good or bad. Games of Note specifically wants to talk about the games that have had an impact, an outsized impact on game design, on the industry of games, on the culture of games, and about how that is something that you should care about now and whether or not you should play those games. So there's a little touch of review there. But Wayne is not, hopefully, just two guys rambling about games that they remember.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that, it's in the name, right? It needs to be of note. It needs to be notable. And that, as you say, doesn't mean that it has to be good. The idea is that there has got to be some level of impact. So Will, should we just go into our histories and maybe talk a little bit about what we've done in the video game sector?
Sounds good. I call myself a game designer, which is maybe too narrow. It's my history. I'm best known for a couple of things. So I wrote a book which is called Free to Play, which was published by Pearson, and that is about the game design of free to play. And it goes into the details of like how you make money, how you market games. So it's kind of quite broad, and it became the book on the subject. So if you go into lots of mobile studios now, you'll see that on the bookshelf in the sort of shared library.
How does that feel?
It feels good. Like, yeah, sometimes people reach out to me and they say kind things about the book. It's been a long time. It's probably a little bit outdated now. I also ran product on Angry Birds 2 and was executive producer at Rovio, the company behind Angry Birds title. So I founded a studio in London for them, making an MMO that got cancelled.
Can you talk about it?
Do you know what? I think maybe that could be an episode one day.
Okay.
The cancelled Rovio MMORPG. It was super interesting. And I've also worked at Sega in my history. So that was my first proper games job. And I have also started and run my own studios. I've done consulting work on lots of really big titles. So I worked on RuneScape for Jagex, Rust for Face Punch, the makers of Gary's Mod. I've also worked with Tencent on big battle royale games, as well as Facebook from some of their mobile clients. So I've been around in games doing stuff which is sort of at the intersection of creativity and business for a number of years. And I also really, really love games, and I love games history. I love understanding where things came from. I love board games. I love physical games like pinball, big pinball fan. I love retro games. I love modern PC games. Basically any kind of form of game, amusement arcades, ticket redemption. I love it. I'm passionate about it to some degree and have some intricate knowledge of it due to my eclectic nature given to my neurodiversities of ADHD.
Yeah. And that's true. You are into lots of things, which I think is awesome. So I guess for me, I've been in the space for, 14, 15 years. I started off at King. That was my first role within the gaming sector. I was working on ads. So like all the things that people love. So working on like pre-roll ads, mid-roll ads, and then bigger in-game integrations and partnerships. So I was working with a lot of media agencies, trying to sell them on video games and why actually the audience is engaged, and more so than say your traditional other medias like TV or some other publication like The Guardian or whatever else it may have been. So that was really fascinating. I got to work with some really interesting brands like Unilever and P&G and Universal Music and
You're basically
whatnot.
the Don Draper of games, mobile games.
No, there's a lot of people who've been in the space who've done stuff within ads. And so after King, I then went to Rovio and I did a very similar role. And actually, we probably were at Rovio, maybe we crossed over maybe for 6 months, but we didn't know each other. I was based in London.
No.
And
Yes.
you were probably in Helsinki or something, right?
I actually ended up occupying the same office as you.
You probably did, yeah, after we left.
Though we never crossed paths.
That's correct.
Yes.
So I was at Rovio for a couple of years and then was made redundant at Rovio, which happens. And then I kind of got a bit sick of the ad space. Like, I hated the power dynamic between media owners that were publishers, game studios, media agencies, and then the client themselves. I just began to hate it and wanted to do something else within the gaming sector, but not that. And so this opportunity came up at War Child, and I was working, basically worked for them for a couple of years, doing stuff with gaming and charity. And I thought that was probably one of the best jobs I ever had, and then left that at the end of 2019 and joined TikTok and was running gaming partnerships there for about 4.5 years up until last year. And then I became a consultant. So that's me and that's my background. And I also love games. I grew up on the SNES era of video games, I would say, with Nintendo. And I adore games from the 90s and early 2000s. There's like a window of 94 to 2002
and we have talked about like the risk of the podcast focusing too heavily on that era.
Correct. And we're going to make sure that we don't just do that. I mean, one of the episodes that we're going to cover, games we're going to discuss, is Farmville, which is absolutely none of that. And it's very different to what you and I traditionally play. So hopefully it's going to be a really fun podcast with our very quite different backgrounds.
Yes, I think we do have, both of us, a kind of encyclopedic knowledge of quite obscure or interesting games that have been important throughout history. And that really kind of brings us on to like why we started this podcast. And there was a sense of, for me at least, when you suggested, hey, because we talk a lot and we talk about games and we get very passionate about it. And there was a suggestion from you like, oh, hey, we should do some sort of podcast. And I was like, I'm really reluctant to just do a podcast. And if we are going to do it, the way that I want to do it is it's about games history and it's well researched. So I think that there are enough people having opinions or memories of games from their past or opinions of modern games. The world doesn't need more of that, but there's very little intelligent conversation about.
Are you saying we're intelligent?
I'm suggesting that we can pretend that we are through decent research.
Good. I feel better.
And so the intention of the podcast is really to be about how do we pick games that are historically important, significant? How do we put them in context? How do we talk about them? How do we bring that information? And for people that perhaps don't have the same background in gaming as us, that haven't lived through the eras and generations of games that we have, how do they understand what the bits or the games that are perhaps hidden gems or games that had an impact but didn't have notoriety and that are perhaps more obscure games? So we've recorded 3 episodes to this point. We're preparing a 4th one, and those episodes are Shenmue, which is a reasonably obscure-ish Japanese Dreamcast game. The second one is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Now, you may be aware of Castlevania, you may be aware of Symphony of the Night. I think it's not a widely known game. And then the third one is Farmville, which might seem strange that actually a lot of people in games culture don't really want to talk about Farmville. They're not particularly interested in it, but it had a really outsized impact on our industry.
Absolutely.
And then the next one we're going to record is Dear Esther. So if you don't know that, like an absolutely incredible indie hit, which really challenged a lot of assumptions about game design and what games could be and should be. And there's a lot of question even if the game is a game, right? So all of these are games that we think are important or significant. We probably won't be covering lots of big hits, even as much as Super Mario 64 is a huge successful game, was really impactful. There's probably enough written about that, I think, Wayne. Would that be a game that we'd ever cover?
I mean, it is clearly notable and it had a huge impact, you know, whether it's the use of the camera, control, 3D movement in space, like, yeah, there are, it fits the bill. It's just, you're right. Lots of people probably have already covered it in great depth. How many people have maybe discussed Farmville though? Probably not as many. So yeah, I think I completely agree. That's the reason for this podcast, I think, is to maybe just also discuss the things that you might not know about. And we then get to make obscure references to things like Gitsuru Man.
Yes. Bangai-O. I don't know where that's come to my head, but
Bangai-O. Yeah. That's another good one.
Wayne, let's talk a little bit about some of our favourite games.
Yes.
These might be games that we cover, maybe aren't. What is your favourite game of all time? Do you have a favourite game?
Absolutely not. I do not. I'm of the opinion that I never have I don't have a favourite anything, you know, whether it's video games, whether it's movie or it's music, because my opinion on things changes all the time. I could tell you what's in my top 20 list of games that I think about quite often, but I couldn't put a rank to it at all. I can tell you what my number 1 was. I could just tell you, like, I find these games really interesting. And so it would be things like, the first one that comes into my head, actually, well, it's Star Fox 64. Like, Star Fox 64 is one of my favorite titles. Shenmue, but more specifically Shenmue 2. I dig that more. Street Fighter, the entire series, various permutations of that, etc.
You're very much a fighter fan, right?
Well, Yes, I think I'm more open to fighting games than most people are. I don't think I'm particularly good at all of them. There's some that I play more than others. I like the Capcom fighting games. So I like things like Street Fighter. I like Project Justice, like Rival Schools and Darkstalkers, although I'm not very good at Darkstalkers. And then there's things like Virtua Fighter, so I'm a big Virtua Fighter 5 fan, and I like the Dragon Ball Fighters Z game that was by Arc System Works. So there's like particular ones I'm really into, but things like Guilty Gear, Glass Blue or Blaze Blue, however you say that one, I'm not a big fan of. I'm not really into KOF, although I love the original fighting. I love the art style of that. Yeah, I wouldn't say like I'm not. I like fighting games. I'm not the best at all of them.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same, right? Like, it's how do you pick a game as your favorite game? There are loads of games that I've loved throughout history. One of which is Ico. I know the correct pronunciation is Eco from Team Eco, which was a really minimalist PS2 game. And I think that there were a few games around this era, which was sort of my awakening towards games as art or a creative endeavor, something that I wanted to engage with. So Shenmue is one, Res by Tetsuya Mizuguchi, basically anything Tetsuya Mizuguchi's ever done. Also, I really, really love Magic the Gathering. So the physical card game as well as the digital versions of that. I've spent over the years probably in excess of about $10,000 playing, collecting Magic the Gathering. First played back in the 90s, picked it up again maybe about a decade ago. And Magic the Gathering is a little bit like the virus herpes. It might not always be present in your life, but it lives in your body.
What an analogy.
So I know that at some point Magic the Gathering will come back and be at the forefront of my mind, and then I'll rid myself of it. It will reappear. So that's a game I really love. I really love the Neo Geo, Dreamcast, that era. But also, I like games that are on the fringes and the periphery, games that do things which are controversial, a little bit interesting often. And one of those games is a game called Game of War. So most people know Game of War from the fact that you just couldn't escape the adverts about maybe sort of 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a mobile game. It was really, really systemic. There was just lots and lots of overlapping systems and mechanics, and it had this sort of MMO-esque type of experience, but it also had lots of real money at stake, and it led to these really, really incredibly emotionally tense moments, and really interesting stories. A little bit like EVE Online, I think. Again, there's like a big financial element to that. And really interesting games that do stuff with money, and Magic the Gathering also has that. And I love games where there's sort of like an interaction between people that has stakes and meaning. Again, Magic the Gathering, tournaments, things like that. I know that my blind spot is narrative games. Right. I'm really not very well versed. I really struggle to enjoy JRPGs, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know I'm not sort of a very narrative focused gamer. But that said, the next episode is going to be really heavily about a game which is nothing but narrative. And is one of my favorite games. So, Dear Esther. So yeah, and I think like you, we're not children, so we don't have favorites of anything. But we definitely have preferences. But I would say that our preferences are quite broad.
Yeah, I would say so. Because I think I'm not as into Western RPGs that I think it feels like a lot of people are. But I really appreciate like Mass Effect 2. I think that's like a phenomenal game. The second I see something that, like, I personally am not a big fan of the fantasy setting. So anything that's like Lord of the Rings, anything that's got orcs and anything like that typically turns me off. So things like Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't appeal to me, despite how good and critically acclaimed it is.
Yes.
So there are I also have some blind spots in things like that. And yeah, like Witcher 3, I didn't get into either, but I did quite enjoy things like their take on Cyberpunk, so Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, that's who we are. That's what we're doing. That's why we're doing a podcast. And where can people find us, Wayne?
Well, they can find us on various different platforms. So we are on Blue Sky, we're on TikTok, we are on Discord, all under the name Games of Note.
Thank you.